when truth becomes stranger than fiction. This is the latest transmission of Rice Against the Grain. I'm Rice, and today I am joined by KL, aka Mr. Beneficiary, for lesson number 7 in our ongoing educational series, covering the doctrine of necessity and the law of belligerent occupation. There will be links in the video description and comment section for the KL playlist that includes lessons 1 through 6. It is strongly recommended that you watch those videos before proceeding with today's lesson. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on today's show is a returning guest. I am rejoined by KL, aka Mr. Beneficiary. KL, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Good, Chris. Thanks for having me back. I always enjoy our philosophical discussions.
Likewise, my friend. And thank you again for making the time to do this. This is ultimately going to turn into lesson number 7. And what that means is that there are 6 previous lessons. So down below in the video description and the pinned comment, I'm going to put links down below for this YouTube Rice Against the Grain KL, aka Mr. Beneficiary playlist. Then I'm also going to put a link for the Odyssey playlist, which includes the older lessons that we redid. So if you want to watch all the lessons in its entirety. The other thing I wanted to mention for people who might be familiar is a little over a year ago, me and KL had partnered up with the Freedom USB package, and that has went very well. So I wanted to do a real quick update about the Freedom USB package and then kind of get into lesson number 7. But I guess rudely, I did not ask overall since the last time you've been on, because you've been on a really interesting health journey. It seems like you've recovered really well and you look very healthy, but for everybody watching, everybody curious, can you give us an update on your health situation and how everything's going with you?
Actually going very well at the present time. The history is basically I had neck cancer about 10, 12 years ago originally. Had surgery at the time, and then it came back about somewhat last year. Had to undergo, it just came back worse kind of a thing. And I think Chris, when he saw me, he would attest to it looked pretty darn bad. But, what I was doing seemed to work real well. And I've had several CAT scans and PET scans over the past year where it basically shows it's gone. So everything is good, and I'm pretty happy with that result.
When I came down and visited you the end of March, beginning of April of 2023, that's when, and in the private lessons that we recorded that are on the USB, you can see the growth that was on your neck. So again, I'm so happy to see people recover from situations like that in general, but I'm really happy to see people that I care about recover from situations like that. So I'm glad, man. Because that's part of the reason why I went down and recorded with you.
Right.
So to get back into this, the Freedom USB package, this is the update that I want to let people know. Everything you see here on the screen, you will get. I will pull it up on my screen so I can make sure I can read it to everybody. But the initial student instructions, recommendations, all the private lessons and documents, all the public lessons and documents, instructions and videos about the long and short form birth certificate authentication, and the DBA they're doing business as. You would be added to a private Telegram group with current and former KL students. If you are a current or former KL student and you're not in the group, you can email me at the information below so you can get added to the group. But right now there's 175 people in that group, current and former students that are all helping each other out. Again, this is everything you're going to need to do before reaching out to KL for the final process. The USB itself is $500 donation. And then once you complete everything that's needed on your own from the USB, and of course you got help and support from the Telegram group community, and you can reach out to KL if you need to. The second part of it, when you reach out to KL for the paperwork, would be $1,000. Previously, we had an $800 price. That's changed to $1,000, and I just wanted to update people. So the total cost after it's all said and done would be $1,500. but you could pay the 500 first and then contact KL. He can work out payment arrangements with you if need be. I know you've done that before. Do you have anything that you want to add in regards to the Freedom USB package, my friend?
Well, just to explain that, additional costs are really strictly because I had to hire an assistant, because there's been such a demand across the country and the world to try to get out from under the thumb of government. So Chris has met me in person. He'll tell you, I'm not in this for the money. I'm trying to help people on their own journey. And I try to do things as economically as possible, but there is work involved, especially for me on my end, as I have to prepare and write all the paperwork. So, I believe that I have something to offer people, especially ones that want to be finally free of government and govern themselves.
I 100% agree. I will say, though, that people don't really truly value something that's free, which is another reason, too, is you've been accumulating wisdom, information, and data 30 plus years and putting this together. And in the process of your 30 plus years of doing that, you were doing the same thing. You were paying other people to go to seminars for their courses. So you've put a lot of your own into this as well. And time is our most valuable asset, because there's been a few people that reached out to me that want to complain. And for those, I just want to say, really, in all honesty, people do not value something that's given to you. Usually, and I can use like for me, having a car. My dad taught me, if I buy my own first car, I'm going to take better care of it than had he bought a car and given it to me. Maybe you said the same thing to your son.
Yes, I made my sons work for everything. We call it skin in the game. Yes. I think what's wrong with a lot of people today is their expectations, and that if you receive something of value, you should give something of value. That's just common sense to me.
Right.
And to expect it, that because I spent my own $50,000 plus and I traveled around the country and the world to learn this and that, for somehow, just because I know it, I should have to just give it to you, is irresponsible. And it's irresponsible of me just to give it to you without teaching you how to use it. It's like giving you a loaded gun. I can't do that, because this can get you into trouble if you don't know what you're doing. So there has to be this monitored approach where I'm slowly helping you. So one, you don't get yourself in trouble, and you do it correctly, so it will work. It is what it is. And time, yes, is valuable to me, my family, my wife, but it's also valuable to you. It should be valuable. You should learn to, if you learn something of value, to reciprocate value, whether you give it forward or to somebody else or whatever. But I think the world would be a better place if we all took that approach.
No, I 100% agree, my friend. And, I've also nicknamed you. You have a lot of nicknames, Mr. Fix It, because a lot of people have gone the routes of people like David Straits, Anna von Reitz, even Brandon Joe Williams. But what eventually takes place is they make their way to KL and his teaching and your teachings. So, and there's a reason for that. Even if some of these people might give some of the information away for free, but they're not going to talk to you in regards to it beyond that. You're on your own. So that's where you can get lost and do something that maybe isn't correct. And again, I've just had numerous previous students from David Straits a lot, Anna Wright, and there's others as well, but just those three names, I've had more people reach out to me because they're like, after talking to other people, listening to all the lessons that we've done, some of the videos you've done with Crow 777, have come to the conclusion that this is the right method to go. And I know David Strait doesn't do it for free. I know Anna von Reitz doesn't do it for free. And I know if you do consultations with Brandon Joe Williams, that's not for free either. So people just need to take all that in consideration. And that's the last of the rant that I'm going to say with that. The information scrolling across the bottom of the screen is how you can contact me to get one of the Freedom USBs. You can go to ricetvx.com/USB for more information. And I will be updating the video underneath of it. The video underneath says $800 for the second part. Again, that is updated. $500 for the USB to me and then $1,000 for the second part to KL. Those are the donation processes moving forward. All right, my friend. So you said you have a brand new lesson, which I'm always excited. When I saw some of this, I thought some of it might have been related to some previous stuff that we've covered, but you told me it's not. So we have lesson number 7, officially called the Doctrine of Necessity / the Law of Belligerent Occupation. And what I'm going to do real quick is get the notes up on screen, but feel free to take over, Mr. Beneficiary.
Okay. Let me expand a little bit on what you finished up with, what I will call others, Anna, David Strait, Brendan, Joe. None of them take this into consideration, this present law form that everyone is under. It's not only just us, it's everybody across the world. You know, it's not the Constitution, it's not statute and codes. We're under a different law form, and I'm going to try to explain where that came from. In other words, how did we get here today? You know, how did all of this happen? Why are all of these things happening? I'm going to try to comment and try to explain and hope you to get you to understand how this relates and how our past and what happened in the past relates to exactly what's going on now and why these things are happening. Okay. Now, I normally like to at least bring up like an analogy of what's going on in the world today and try to explain again and show you how this is working. If you haven't or don't know about the case in New York City where the guy accidentally strangled the guy that, you know, was menacing, or everyone thought they were being endangered on the subway. You heard about that case, Chris?
No, I mean, I heard a lot of cases like this. How long ago was the one you're talking about?
I think it was about 1.5 years ago, but it's under trial right now, and that's why it's on the news. So in other words, what you've got is a guy being charged with manslaughter because he was trying to protect everyone else on the subway. Actually, 2 guys. One was holding his legs. He put him in a chokehold, and the guy ended up dying. Okay? So he's being charged with, I don't know if it's second-degree murder and manslaughter, but the point is the defense. What is the defense using as a defense in this case? Well, of course, they're using the self-defense, right? And that's what most people, including myself, think is a natural right that everyone on this planet has, is a right to defend yourself if you feel that your life isn't threatened or others around you are threatened, right? It's pretty, I would put it in the common sense picture, right?
Right.
Well, yes, you know, and the other thing I've learned, you know, it took me a long time to learn throughout my life, is that anything good in this world can also be used for evil and vice versa. So, you know, nuclear bombs could be used for bad, but they can also be used for good, for deterrent. Guns, weapons, knives. Again, all of this can be used for good things, for self-defense, or it can be used for bad things and used in a wrong way. So most things, again, on this planet, I believe, unfortunately, can be used for either or. And that's part of what my talk is about today, the Doctrine of Necessity and Law of Belligerent Occupation. Now, I'm going to define the doctrine of necessity, the basis on which extraordinary action by administrative authority which are designed to restore safety and order. Now, such actions are to presume to be lawful even if such action is unconstitutional, like self-defense. Normally, it is against the law to kill somebody, but in emergencies or in self-defense, it's not against the law to do that. That's the doctrine, that you were protecting yourself for the safety of you and others, right? And the law of belligerent occupation is really the doctrine of necessity, okay? The law of belligerent occupation governs the relationship between the occupying power and the wholly or partially occupied state and its inhabitants, including refugees and stateless persons. But I'll get into this a little bit more.
Real quick, okay. When the self-defense thing makes sense, how it's normally against the law to, like, unless you're in an emergency situation, then it's not against the law. It reminds me very much of this idea of, let's say, you can't, how do I put this? how the idea of a license. So it's illegal to hunt for deer unless you get a license. It's illegal to drive a vehicle unless you get a license. So it's as if all these things are against the law, unlawful, illegal, however you want to look at it, but they're giving you a permission slip to break the law.
That's exactly it. How about marriage? Isn't it against the law? You got to have a permission slip.
You got to have a marriage certificate to be officially recognized by the government.
Yes.
It just made me think about that, because that whole idea of a license to commit illegal activity,
an illegal act. Yes,
that's basically
exactly
because you can't do it otherwise. It's illegal otherwise unless you get permission to do the illegal thing.
Right, then it's okay.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the world.
Yes, the current world that we live in, or since 1933. So, for people who think that the present government's unconstitutional, they're wrong. It is constitutional. Okay, and I'm going to read the section where this is actually covered. Under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of a rebellion or invasion of the public safety may require it. So they're giving it out there. Okay, that's the excuse. If there's a national emergency, then they can pick you up and put you in jail without a warrant. Right now, I'm sure most people have at least heard about 1861. We had the Civil War. President Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. He was putting people in jail just because he said so. Okay, but because that the Congress didn't have a quorum, he declared a national emergency. And under that national emergency, to restore order and safety, he could constitutionally suspend certain constitutional rights. So there were a lot of people that he just had jailed, acted like a dictator. Okay. And again, is it right or wrong? Sure, I think it's wrong, but I think the main point, under the definition of the legal world, it was perfectly legal. It's under the Constitution. It's okay to do. If you've been listening to TV, President Trump says he's going to declare a national emergency on the border, right? Isn't that one of the first things he's going to do? So he's already telling us. President, Nixon declared a national emergency, war on drugs. Everything's a war on fentanyl, war on this, war on that. That's what they're doing, is invoking that law of necessity, that we can suspend the normal constitutional powers, and thus we can do things that wouldn't normally be legal or lawful to do.
So this originates on the U.S. side, I'm assuming, like taking that law of belligerent occupation and using something like by putting acts in place, like Trading with the Enemy Act, and then redefining what the enemy and what the Trading with the Enemy Act includes in a 1933 time period. And then, like you said, making sure that we're always in some sort of state of war, whether or not it seems serious, but just declaring a war on drugs is enough. And that was obviously 1980s, Nancy Reagan era.
Yes. Now, if you want to do a little reading, this is a 2-volume book, the Department of Defense Law of War Manual. Everything's covered in here. Okay. And this is volume 2. I got volume 1 up here on the bookshelf. But all of this is covered, that all of this is well within the Constitution, well within even lawful. Our founding fathers put it in our Constitution. So you can't say what they're doing is illegal, or it might be criminal under normal circumstances, but in their eyes, it's okay, because there's an exception to the rule. Okay. And again, I wish things were different, but I deal more with reality so you can understand why and how and everything that's going on. Okay. And basically, we're under what I would call, I'm going to go over this, feudalism. I'm sure people, at least in my days, might have read about that. In today's education, I seriously doubt it. But, feudalism used to be thought of as serfdom, slavery. Okay, and it used to happen a lot back in the Middle Ages and way before that time. And I'm going to kind of go over that a little bit to try to show you that the mechanism that they were using, that feudalism uses, is the same exact thing these national emergencies are invoking and implementing now. Okay, and it's all done for a reason. It's all done for control. It's all done to have power over, the small amount of people have power over the masses. This is what and how they do everything. Okay.
Okay.
So at one time, the Roman Empire had been strong enough to keep peace and order all throughout Europe. But when the empire started to decline, people had to find a way to protect themselves because Germanic tribes were overrunning parts of the Roman Empire, which, you can totally understand this. And again, on a common sense level, if you're having invaders come in and you want to be protected, if you're in England, in the Roman Empire is in Rome, there isn't that many soldiers in England that are going to be able to defend you, right? Or to protect you. So the people decided to place themselves under the protection of a powerful person. They elect to be by a dominant member in return for their protection. Men would rather put themselves under the protection of a feudal lord than an emperor. And the reason is nobody really liked the emperor system, when the kings and queens and that kind of stuff, because a lot of them, would just, the next guy would overrun the last guy and kill half the population or put them into slavery. So no one really liked empires. So this new form of government, I'll call it, which was feudalism, was where they put themselves, a smaller number of people put themselves under a more powerful, stronger, maybe richer person and asked for their protection. But in return for that protection, they, of course, had to give them something. Okay, and we're going to get into that as we go along. So, by 814, or the 800s, feudalism was actually the main system of government. And it just so happens that around 800, that's actually when the Catholic Church started up. Okay, so 2,000 years of feudalism, a landholding system in which the land is held in trust, and estate and land was conveyed from a feudal superior to a grantee. A grantee is the person that accepts. The tenant in common, which is just like a mortgage today. It was a process by which individuals gave up their personal liberties in return for protection. It came about as a result of decentralizing the empire rule, which is what I said earlier. It was a combination of legal, economic, military, political, and cultural customs that flourished in Europe from the 9th through the 15th centuries. It is defined as a way of structuring society around relationships derived from the holding of land in exchange for service or labor. It not only included the obligations of the nobility and their obligations, but also the obligations of what they called the three estates of the realm, the nobility, the clergy, and the peasantry. So it kind of brought everybody under that. And this is why a lot of times on my podcast, I'll ask if you ever watched the Game of Thrones, or another one is like the Viking series, or anything in the medieval times or even way before that. It shows you the true system of how things work and who the guy in charge was and how he had power, and he really held control of the land, and he could give away parts of the land to people that maybe fought for him in return, that you were committed to fight for him in his wars and his pillaging, if he wanted to go to another land and do these kinds of things. So the Game of Thrones is full of this system where the king, had title to the land, and it was divided into 7 kingdoms. One of the kingdoms was called the North, and Eddard Stark was the king of the North. Well, he was granted, because he was such a good soldier, he was granted that huge tract of land, and then he had control of all the people in the North. Okay, and all the people of the North had to, be responsible to him, and he would promise to protect them, but in return, they had to he could charge them rent, he could charge them interest or a portion of their crops. He could take a portion of their crops, give it to the king anytime he wanted to. He could confiscate their guns. He also was the actual law. If there was any dispute or somebody stole something, he was the arbitrator. Okay, so just think of it as almost like, I think, how criminal gangs, especially the mafia, is set up a very similar way, where they have the gang and the leader of the gang and then the capo, and then he always goes up to another guy and that guy goes up to another guy. So it's that kind of system where it was broken down into smaller fractions, so people felt that they could be more protected by these smaller groups than if they had one king in a total empire where there were like 1 million people. They just didn't like that system of government. Okay.
Real quick, I want to add that in case this is not something you thought about to add to the equation, is the caste system in India. I'm pretty sure, like, I know it was kind of outlawed, but I'm pretty sure it still exists. And
Yes,
it's
it does.
and I think a lot of the stuff from the Middle Ages and that time period that we're looking at now could have been even based off of the caste system, because the Indian culture seems to be a lot older than the European culture.
Yeah, yes. And again, they try to marry within their economic and social structure, right?
Prearranged marriages.
Prearranged marriages, just like, again, on Game of Thrones, this is what it's all about, is because having an alliance with another faction meant more security for the two groups of people. So the people themselves were actually for it, that they wanted this intermarriage between to have an alliance with another faction. So at least then they knew that faction wouldn't attack them, because, their leaders were married and weren't having children. So again, it seems like nature almost provided a way. I could almost say, a lion's pride is the same way. A lot of animal, chimpanzees, gorillas have a leader. Everyone else is subservient, right? They look for the one guy to protect them all until he gets taken down. Then it's the new guy, right?
Right.
It's like a social structure for animals. Almost all, there's a queen bee, there's a queen ant. They have this social structure for the benefit of them all. And again, whether it's right or wrong, I'm just going to tell you what's really happening. Okay.
Facts are facts.
Now, facts are facts. And we're social animals. I don't care what anybody says. That's the way I look at it. We behave like animals a lot. Now, Are we smart? Yes, but I'm telling you, our basic behavior is kind of like animals. We follow that social order. Okay.
We are animals, though. We're just a higher form of, we think, a higher form of intelligence, and I guess the best predator on the planet. I don't know.
Yes, but the leaders know the psychology, how to control the herd.
Right.
That's how they just know what we will be, what we will believe, how we're duped, whatever. They know how to control us through psychology. Again, look at the history of the world. They figured out that by force just wasn't going to work forever. Sooner or later, they got overthrown. And if you did, again, overthrow was a very temporary thing until the next guy came along. So again, it kind of culminated in a system that had to be different, and that force really wasn't going to work. Psychology was really what was going to control the masses. So, all right, so let's get more into what feudalism is. Before a lord could grant a fief to someone, he had to make that person a vassal. This was done in a ceremony called commendation ceremony, a two-part act of homage and an oath of fealty. During homage, the lord and vassal entered into a contract in which the vassal promised to fight for the lord at his command, whilst the lord agreed to protect the vassal from the external forces and swears an oath to it. This is where the term "my lord" comes from. And if you ever watch these old series, everyone is yes, my lord, yes, my lady. It has to do because they were higher than you. They were superior to you. Okay, everyone called Edic Stark my lord, but he in return called the king my lord. So anyone that was superior to you was referred to as my lord or my lady, depending on if you're man or woman. So these, again, this feudalistic system, this is where these terms come from even today. All right. Such a land grant was called a fief. A vassal is one who received the fief. So if you were the peasant or the soldier that received the grant of land, the use of the land, okay, that's what you were called, a fief. Okay, and it was a feudal land contract that you could use the land, but in reality, the land wasn't yours, because if you disobeyed your lord, he could take it back away from you. Now that term is called escheat, and I'm going to get into that later, but it's because you didn't hold what we call legal title to the land. Again, this is why it was held in trust, that the Lord had the controlling interest of the land. You had the use of the land. So you were fine unless something bad happened or you disobeyed your Lord. Okay. The Lord was judge and jury to the subjects beneath him. Again, I think I went into that. If a vassal broke his promise to the Lord could seize or escheat, which means take back the property and re-grant the land to a more faithful vessel. The Lord could tax his vassals, charge them rents like property tax. The Lord could seize weapons and horses or any other commodity that he wanted. Okay, it was this, more like socialism. That's for the good of all. I have the right to do this, And why do I go over this kind of stuff? Why do I always go back into history? Well, because it has a direct impact of what's going on today. If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, you have to look at the past. That's the secret. Just look at what happened before, because more than likely it's happening again, maybe a little bit different, but history does repeat itself. Okay?
Well, it doesn't repeat, it rhymes.
It rhymes, yes. Okay, so it's very similar. What we're doing now,
and we can definitely learn. You can 100% learn from the past, and that's what we're both saying here.
Because they're controlling us in the same mechanisms. They're calling it something different.
Yeah, they just repackage it.
Shaded different, right? So, but we're doing the same stuff, pretty much the same stuff as how they controlled people for thousands of years. Okay. Today, we pay our property tax bill just like a feudal fealty, and we owe income taxes to the state in a similar feudal relationship. Today, land and houses operate on a dual title system, just like the feudal land holding system that was there 1,000 years ago. All right, Webster's dictionary states there's two kinds of ownership, both legal and equitable. Once a land's title is divided into two different titles, is being placed in trust. The feudal principle being one title is superior to the other title. Of course, the legal title is superior to the equitable title. We also see remnants of feudal law in the form of repossession, escheat, and the abandonment of property, as well as government power to seize property for failing to pay property taxes. Escheat is a feudal term meaning the right of the king to seize the property that had been granted to an unfaithful vessel. So even eminent domain, the whole concept and doctrine of eminent domain is, again, this feudal land relationship, that they have a superior right, if it's for the good of all, that the government says they have the right to take your property. Now, in our Constitution, they give them that right, but they do state that they have to give them a reasonable market value for it. But my point is that the right to take it and seize it is there. Whether you think it's right or not, I'm just telling you it's there. All right. Now, I know, in our other stuff, we've gone over trust a lot. I'm trying not to, repeat any of that older stuff, but you can look at my older stuff if you want to know more about the trust stuff. So let's get into the Holy Alliance of 1213, because this is very, very pertinent. Okay.
Real quick, okay, I want to let people know if they want to see the documents from this lesson number 7 to go ahead and email me at ricemediagroup@protonmail.com. It's the same email that you're going to see scrolling across the bottom of the screen here about the Freedom USB package, ricemediagroup@protonmail.com, but put KL in the subject line for the documents, put USB in the subject line for the USB package. Sorry, go ahead, my friend.
That's okay. So let's go back in time. 1213. King John of England knew he was a sinner and wanted to go to heaven. He contacted the Pope and agreed to grant. And here was the deal. The Pope said, "I tell you what, we can help you on that issue. But here's the deal." The king agreed to grant all of his present land and future land holdings, that's the key, to the Catholic Church in return for his soul to be redeemed so he could go to heaven. The Pope then granted the land back to the king under a feudal grant, okay, where England got administrative authority, but the Vatican retained legal control, what we call controlling interest to the land. Okay, in 1213, the Holy Alliance was a private trust treaty, making international trust law the highest form of law on earth. I'll get into that in a bit. It conveyed the British kingdom to the papacy under a feudal grant. This conveyance directly affects America today, although the United States did not come into existence for another 500 years. So the point of this alliance and why it's so important is this treaty, this contract between the Pope and the King affects America because the Pope is pledging all future land to the Vatican. Okay. And again, this is 1200. So 1492, I mean, basically, people don't get to America to the 1600s a lot. So you can see that even though the King and the Bank of England are subsidizing these trips, these, the colonization, and it was really for trade purposes. So you could get those resources, bring them back and forth, that kind of thing. Any of the land that was granted to the colonists came from the King, but that grant actually originates back to the Pope. So the Pope has always held a controlling interest in the land, even in America. Okay. So
now, real quick, I mean, for people that are just curious about this, like when the next king or queen came in, would they had to have made a proclamation or something to undo it? Or is it automatically assumed that everything that takes place before that king, that royalty gets into its position, that everything else prior to is honored?
Correct. And I'm going to show you where the contract, I'm going to read it to you, where it's in perpetuity is what the language was, which means now and forever.
In regards to the granting to the Catholic Church, to the Pope. Okay.
Yes. And again, I'll get into this, but the England pays for that right to administer the land. And I mean, they've got to pay the Pope on top of it. You see, again, that's a feudal relationship where the Pope sits back, his controlling interest really doesn't anything, but the England's got to pay him for the right to be on that land and to use it. Okay.
It's like the Seste KV has been stamped basically by every royal king or queen since the creation of the Seste KV in the first place.
Right.
Including the current monarchy.
Yeah, let's talk about this 1666 Act. Why did they do that? Because there was an emergency. The Black Plague was killing people in the Fire of London. So you had a lot of people dying. They didn't know what property belonged to who because of the fire. So they declared the national emergency, and we're going to hold the property in trust till people come back and show us who has the rightful claim. That's what this is all about. It's the same thing all over again.
Yeah, just another example of the same thing that you're talking about here.
Exactly. So, and the big point is that if you can come back and make the proper claim, then you can get the titles back to the land and everything is good. But until then, it is presumed, okay, that the titles are unknown and and this forces people to come forward to make the claim. It isn't, just because I'm here means it's mine. Okay. And just like, let's say back in the 1800s, when people were going out west, they had to stake a claim and they had to record it. Well, why would they have to record it? Because so the next guy that took it can't just say it's mine because I'm here. There's a piece of paper that proves that I made the claim first, thus it belongs to this family and not that family. You see? So these systems are all put in place for reasons. Okay. So in a letter from the Pope, I'll quote, by right of lordship, by feudal right, making over in perpetuity to the Holy Roman Church, your kingdoms of England and Ireland, to be held through the church and of the church, subject to an annual payment of 700 marks for England and 300 marks for Ireland. So $1,000 total every year has got to be paid. This document declares the contract between the king and the Pope was legal and binding on all parties, heirs and successors forever. Okay, so that answers your question. This being a private contract, no one can ever challenge or renege on the agreement. This is why in our Constitution also states Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, no state shall pass any law interfering with the obligation of contract. So certain contracts, trust agreements, treaties, yes, we still have to abide by. And again, I'm going to get into it, but the 1783 Treaty of Paris is one of them that we'll just go over lightly. So 2 years later, this is when the people revolt, and even the actual barons, the rich people, didn't like this at all. Okay, because the rich people thought, this is my land, even though they had gotten a grant from the king. Now all of a sudden, oh shoot, the damn Vatican's in the way. Now they can tell us. Now I got to pay them to use the land that I thought was mine in the first place. So they attempt to overthrow the 1213 Holy Allowance. The Pope gave the barons notice of the private contract, thus the barons had no standing to challenge it. The barons had forced the king under threat of death to sign the Magna Carta, but the Pope informed the barons that they had no standing, thus the Pope declared the Magna Carta null and void. Now, what happened?
Did you put Magna
there,
Carta? Yeah, I think my internet was getting a little glitched there for a second. Did Magna Carta, or Carta? Because you have it two different places. I think it's Magna Carta. Not that I'm trying to correct you here, but yeah, I just want to let people know exactly what you were talking about. So what happened in 1213?
A lot of people, a lot of.
Sorry. I think we got that.
Well, 1215 comes along. They try to overthrow that. Right.
Okay.
So what everyone believes, who studies history normally, that our Constitution really kind of came from the Magna Carta. Well, what the Pope told the barons, the rich people, was, I'm sorry, I made a private contract with the king, and you weren't involved, so it doesn't pertain to you. So I'm declaring it null and void. Okay. So just to let you know, in 2013, in England, they had a big celebration, the 800-year anniversary of the Magna Carta. And on, in the papers and stuff, if you go back and look at some of the stuff on the internet, it's called the most famous voided document in history, because everyone thinks, it held, but it really was voided back then right away, which is kind of strange. But, that's how things are today.
On the flip side, to add into that, because it kind of intersects with the Roman aspect when it comes to the law. So previous years before this, you had Justinian in the creation of Corpus Juris, the body of law, and that later was perfected around 12, if my memory serves me correctly, around the 1220, 1230 time period, and that was a Roman juror by the name of Accursus, and he perfected Justinian's Corpus Juris, which is now Corpus Juris Secundum, and so that's kind of an in between there. That's should be added when you get the overall history, because obviously Roman law is what our form of law is based upon.
Yeah, I want the take-home message is everything points back to Rome, the Vatican.
All roads lead to Rome. I thought about that from that was the first thing I thought about looking through these documents.
They are the controlling entity still to this day. And I've researched this for many, many, many years, and it always goes back and leads to the same place. So
a lot of people, real quick too, something, obviously the Pope knows stuff. There was, I think it might have been now about a year ago, but the Pope had made an announcement to all Catholic properties, churches, anything underneath the umbrella of the Catholic Church to take all their money out of whatever bank and send it all to the Vatican Bank. And considering, and at that same time period, you start having some very wealthy individuals selling off a lot of stocks. Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, other people started that process too. So, I mean, obviously with the Catholic Church being in charge of that kind of stuff, the Pope knew something, and that never got covered as much as I think it should have.
Right. Well, think of it again as let's take the Queen of England and now King Charles. When they took power, if you ever watched the ceremony, which of course I would go back and watch those kind of things, where did they actually get the power from? Well, they say the people. Well, not really. It was the one that granted them the power was the Archbishop, the one that was the representative of the Catholic Church, is the one that bestows the power upon, whether it was Queen Elizabeth or King Charles. Okay. It came from the Vatican again. Okay. Didn't come really from the people. People think, but it really isn't. That's where the power really sits. So anyways, so let's go forward about.
I thought they've always claimed divine authority, which would relate back to the church in some capacity.
Yes. Yes, and I'm going to get into that. That's actually the Treaty of Verona in the next couple hundred years, but I'll get to what they said in there.
I'll quit interrupting.
So, and that's okay. 1300, 1302, Unum Sanctum, First Papal Bull declared that it's altogether necessary for salvation for every human creature should be subject to the Roman Pontiff. I mean, think about what he said. He's saying basically everybody on earth should be under the church, under control of the church. In summary, the Holy Alliance of 1213 contains all the elements of a feudal land grant. The Vatican retained ownership of all land in England and Ireland, all future lands in England. The Vatican granted administrative authority back over to the king so they could run it. But in reality, the controlling interest was really on, always has been, with the Vatican. So now we fast forward to America, our revolution, 1776. We declare independence from England. Our founding fathers were rich aristocrats who've been given large land grants from the king and were financed through the Bank of England for commercial purposes in the colonies. You would agree with that statement, wouldn't you? That
Yes.
they were mostly rich white guys who were granted. That means that, they were given these tracts of land, these huge tobacco farm, whatever, to grow tobacco, to grow cotton, so they could ship it back to to England, and everyone could trade. This was all a business adventure in reality.
The company store. This is like when you had the West India Trade Company, the East India Trade Company, all that stuff going on. All of this makes so much sense if you just remember some of the truth you were taught in school, children.
Yes. It's all about commerce. That's what this is all about. Okay. All right. So what really happened after that? We tried to dispossess the king. I'm going to call it like a repossess the land away from him, which we did. We won possession of the land. But then the king didn't give up. What he did, which isn't really covered a lot, which even for me, I went and found this stuff and read up on it. He took the aristocrats back to court. So he took the fight out of the military part and went back to the judiciary, went to court and tried to settle this thing out, because he, obviously lost the land war, but he was trying to get back everything that he had prior to that. So what he did was he started suing in England to get the land tracts that the rich aristocrats had. Okay, so he's going to court under the doctrine of escheat, saying that they, went against the king, and thus I'm taking the land back and I'm going to give it to somebody else. Okay, because the king, again, remember, is the feudal superior to the aristocrats. Okay, so these guys that were the rich guys that borrowed money for the war and now have these big tracts of land or whatever, the king is still trying to go to court in England to take that land back, let alone he took all of the lands back that they held in England. So they were losing a lot of their stuff back where they came from. Okay, so guess what happens? Well, they say, well, how are we going to fix this? All right, well, let's have a peace treaty. Let's have a little meeting where we get all of this settled out. Okay, and 7 years after the Revolutionary War, 1783, called the Treaty of Peace, the King of England placed the wealthy aristocrats in a political checkmate, declares the colonies free and independent from the king, but stops short of declaring America free from the king's feudal lord, the Vatican, which I keep trying to tell you. Why was the Pope representative of the treaty? If you read the first sentence in the treaty on who was there, representative from the Vatican, representative for the king, and then we send 3 lawyers, John Adams, John Jay, and Benjamin Franklin, all esquires of the crown. Okay. To protect the interest in the land titles, in the treaty, the seizures of the estates end. So under the treaty, the king says, okay, I tell you what, you wealthy MFers, you can have your land back. Okay. I'm going to stop doing that, and I'm going to actually grant it back to you, which he had the authority to do, which is, of course, what they wanted. They wanted all of their rich land back. Okay. But the compromise was, oh my God, we're in debt. The Bank of England had bought off the debt from the Bank of France. So again, this compromise was that we'll pay you back the $6 million we borrowed from France, to beat you. And, under the international banking laws at that time, they had to pay it back in 7 years, or 7 years, it became due. Okay. And hang on 1 second. I'm just going to walk over here and plug this in a little bit.
Right. No problem at all. Again, I'll take a moment while you're doing that to just promote again the USB. If you guys are interested in the Freedom USB package and learning from KL directly, the best way to do it is with the Freedom USB package. It is a $500 donation. You get everything that's included on the screen here. You can find this information at ricetvx.com/USB. And as a matter of fact, what I'll do for everybody is throw up some little information at the very bottom of the screen that'll scroll here. So again, if you do want to learn from Mr. Beneficiary, this is the way to go. And then once you complete everything on the USB, then you can move on to the second part. Reach out to KL for the $1,000 donation and get the paperwork process and get everything corrected. All right, my friend, you good?
Yes. Okay. So again, we borrow the money. We say we'll pay it back by 1790. But unfortunately, of course, we formed the Articles of Confederation. We borrow more money from the Bank of England, another $12 million. So everyone knows this debt of $18 million is going to come up in 1790. And if not, then the king, again, is going to escheat, take back not only the land, but anything else he can of a property. And they all know this. They all know by international law, this is what's going to happen. So if you remember, and again, it's a history lesson, that our founding fathers met in secret, didn't they? Okay. Now I figured out what. Now I know why they met in secret.
Well, okay. that would also be another thing. You could say they met in private.
In private, yes. Okay. So they socialized the debt, basically saying, okay, we'll form this new government where they will be the responsible party, but we'll agree to pay it. We're just going to really push it out 70 years. Now that we've formed a country by, again, international banking law treaty, that debt note can go out 70 years. So it's not due, to get a breath of fresh air. But of course, the Bank of England says you have to start the first national bank, like the first Federal Reserve, and it's got a 20-year charter. There's certain stipulations that all go into this. Now, the other thing
that's the first central bank that was created after the creation of our country.
Correct. 1791 is when that started.
Right.
Okay. Now, the reason it waited till 1791 is because 1789, only 9 of the states ratified, which meant they were coming on as sureties to the debt, which means they were agreeing to take on the debt. So the other 4 held back and said, no, we're not doing that yet. So not until all 13 states agreed to be responsible for the debt, did then the national bank start. Okay, then things got rolling. Is when all 13 co-signed. Everybody was a co-signer onto the debt. Okay, right. I'll be part of it. Okay, it's basically what was happening. All right. Now, the other thing that really caught my eye is that, I have a copy of the Constitution right above me, right on my wall in my office, that all of those signatures are signatures by witnesses. Okay, they weren't. It really wasn't signed. It was witnessed. I think the biggest.
Yeah, I think I've heard this before about it, it not actually being a actual binding agreement because it wasn't technically signed.
Well, by them, so they're not liable.
Or autographed.
They witnessed it. Right. That is true. But still, they formed this trust agreement. The Constitution is a trust. Again, this is the biggest thing you can take away, is that it's a trust. And that the beneficiaries were we, the people of the states, and the posterity. So all the people to come were supposed to benefit from the resources of the land of the United States of America. And that's really how this thing was set up by our rich, we'll call them our rich uncles. Okay.
And this is the reason why they met in secret or private?
Yes. Yeah, because all of this and with the money situation, I think, it would have taken 20 years to compromise the people to get them to agree. And they knew they were under a time constraint. So this had to be done quickly. It was urgent. A compromise had to be made. Otherwise, the land that was first theirs, then taken away, now given back to them was going to be taken back away again. So all of those rich guys were going to lose everything, and they didn't want that. Okay. So again, whether it's right or wrong, I understand why and how it happened. Okay. But the thing that makes you, I'd say part of that contract, part of that trust agreement, is when you agree to state allegiance to the country in return for their protection. So here we go again. It's the same kind of relationship, isn't it? That I will be a citizen of the United States of America, but in return, you got to protect us, right? And protect me. Isn't that what we're doing?
Rights and duties.
Yes, right. So
Privileges,
whatever
rights,
comes along with that. So then we get to what? That's after 1790-ish. The Vatican has a big meeting. They call it the Treaty of Verona of 1822, Article 1, which is the very first thing they say. The high contracting powers being convinced that the system of representative government is equally incompatible with the monarchy principles as the sovereignty of the people of the divine right, them, in the most solemn manner, to use all of their effort to put an end to the system of representative government in whatever country it may exist, and to prevent it from being introduced into those countries where it is not yet known. So the Vatican and the Crown quickly learn within 20, 30 years that all the money's going to America. That's where all the foreign investments going. They're not making as much money as they used to. And so they basically state on paper that we can't have that anymore. We got to do everything we can to stop it, and we got to do everything in our power to prevent it from happening anywhere else on earth. And you thought they were a church doing good things. It's telling you that it's all about power again. Power, control, resources. What are we fighting wars today for?
Resources, control.
Gas, land, wheat. Ukraine.
It's all resources.
It's all resources. The same game all over again. Yep. So that brings us back. Although let's get to a little more present day. Since in 1933, the USA was ripe for conversion to a socialist democracy. The people were beaten down by the Great Depression, which was initiated by derivatives in the stock market. Of course, their derivatives were again made legal after they crashed the market. They made them illegal, and then again in 1999, of course, they come back. And now look at the debt we're in today.
The only thing I would correct you on that real quick, though, is that the cause of that wasn't necessarily derivatives. It was the Federal Reserve that was created in 1913. And I encourage people that want to learn more about the not so Federal Reserve to read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and check out my interviews with G. Edward Griffin, the author.
Yes, I believe really what kicked it off was when, if you read the 1913 Act, that they wanted to be paid in gold certificates. They didn't all want Federal Reserve notes. And first of all, we paid them 6% on the debt. So basically, all the banks that used to if you brought in your dollar bill, they would for gold, they would redeem it in gold. Mm-hmm. So they couldn't do that because all of it was promised to the Federal Reserve Bank. That's really what the national emergency was. 33, that there wasn't enough gold in the account anymore to redeem everything.
What you're talking about is where they made it illegal for U.S. citizens to own gold. You had to sell your gold back not back, but sell it to the U.S. government. And then they raised the rate like 75% after that. I think it went from like $20 an ounce to like 35, and I'm just giving round numbers.
It went from $20 to $35 an ounce and stayed there till 1971.
Which is about, I think that's 75% increase. Like 100% would be 40.
Yes, but that means the purchasing power of the dollar went down 75%.
Right, and if people look at a graph, it's done nothing but that. I don't know if I still have this graph up.
Right. So it caused massive inflation.
Can you see what's on screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That is a good representation right there of what's happened to our money. That's like the graph, but instead it's being replaced with a ripped dollar bill to show how much the value of the dollar is diminished.
Yes.
And we've lost all this purchasing power. That's another conversation for another day. We talked about it on previous videos, so make sure you're checking out lessons 1 through 6, linked down below in the video description, and the old lessons as well. So catch up, all you new people. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. So, depression sets in. They changed the guard. FDR comes in, okay? And he was inaugurated March 4th, 1933, as a Saturday. I'm going to give you just a couple quotes from his inauguration speech. This is a day of national consecration, which means it's to set apart one's private property to some public use. So we're going to take from one to give to the other. FDR speaks of the common good, the scale and redistribution to provide a better use of the land for those best suited for the land, the need for national planning, supervision of all transportation and communication and finance. We must sacrifice for the common good. I propose to offer, pledging will bind us, dedicated to a common purpose. I am prepared under my constitutional authority to recommend measures that a stricken nation may require. I shall seek to bring speedy adoption, but in the event that Congress shall fail to take this course, and in the event that a national emergency is still critical, I shall ask Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis, broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency as great as the power that would be given to me if it were invaded by a foreign foe. That is the doctrine of necessity. That is the doctrine of belligerent occupation. He's saying there's such a crisis of a national measure, national emergency with the banking system, that he gets to bring in these new special, and the key word is executive powers. And the executive power really only has power over the DC citizens or residents of DC. Okay, but in today, what of course they did was they broadened those definitions to basically almost put everyone in every other state under it. So you could be living, you could be a Union State citizen living in Texas, but for income tax purposes, you're a resident of the District of Columbia. And that's how they presume, under the doctrine of necessity, to have authority over you, which they really don't. Because if you read these things, it's always about, it's only if you're under the jurisdiction thereof. So again, what you have to do is know how to make the claim that you're not under their jurisdiction. Thus, you don't have to abide by their mandates or executive orders, because that only covers those people in Washington, D.C., or that agree to be under that jurisdiction. Okay? It really doesn't cover you. And you've read some of my paperwork, Chris, and I think you really, really get the picture of why we claim we're a pre-March 9th, 1933 private American citizen, because we have to make that claim that we're declaring citizenship prior to enactment of that national emergency. And that's why we're not under that emergency. And because we're not under that emergency, we're really covered under Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution. So if we claim that we're under the Constitution, we have all of our Bill of Rights are secured. But if you say you're a U.S. citizen, you do not have any of your Bill of Rights, and you're considered that you're a citizen or resident of the District of Columbia, and that you're under all this executive, administrative, statute, and code power. Okay? So, are you still there?
Yeah, no, I wanted to add something, but I don't know if it's worth me adding. But I saw something, read something about from Howard Freeman talking about kind of like how we got here, basically with a flaw in the Constitution. I don't remember the section, but basically two governments were created at the time of the Constitution, and the Rockefeller, or your Rockefeller banking dynasty. After the War of 1812, Andrew Jackson getting rid of the second central bank in the United States, and then going to the Civil War and the restoration of the United States, this flaw was discovered. Second Nation was being enacted, and it up through 1933. And what it literally kind of did, what he explains, is taking under the executive branch, I believe is what he had it, and creating all three branches of government underneath the executive branch, which would put us in that kind of, well, that's kind of why, in a sense, I'll send you the link for it. Okay. You may have heard it before, but just this idea that there were two countries created as a flaw. The bankers.
Not really. Let me explain. The two jurisdictions are not really a flaw. Either you're under the Union, which are the 50 Union states. Now, is the District of Columbia one of the 50 Union states? No.
It's not,
Well, then
but
it
it's
has
not
to have it.
right. But it's not technically anything. So in a sense, it's its own.
Correct, but it
It's its
has to
own
have
territory.
it. It has to have its own jurisdiction. Correct.
Right, which is within
It
the
has to
bounds of
be
Washington, D.C., the District
right.
of
It has
Columbia.
to be a separate jurisdiction. So those are your two jurisdictions. Okay,
Right, but
and
then you extend out the
that
jurisdiction
one was
of
extended.
Washington, D.C., and you
Right.
kind of cover up the Republic with
Well,
the in
right. I
blanketed
call it
version, because everything's broken into federal districts. So, and if you go to a federal courthouse, you're technically on federal property, so you're not in your state.
correct.
So, but at the same time, your state's under part of like the larger version of like expanding DC. So basically, the United States, the corporate side is basically just Washington DC extended
Right.
everywhere,
And now,
and that's what
but
kind
you're
of gave it that.
missing. Yeah, you're missing the big point. That is absolutely correct. 99%. But they couldn't do away with the original Constitution. They can't do away with Article 3. Okay,
Right.
they have to give it to you. But you have to know how to access Article 3 in their jurisdiction. So, again, what is happening today is that we are in a foreign jurisdiction. Okay, this is why, they can make you put plates on your car, why it has to be registered, why you got to have insurance, why you got to have property tax. Why you're in their jurisdiction, you have to abide by their rules. Now, there is remedy, and they'll give you remedy, but you got to know how to do it. And that's really, again, all about what my process or my system, my way of teaching you is to teach you how you're not under that jurisdiction. Okay.
Okay.
So yes, I'm agreeing with the 99% of what you're saying, but there is a way out. It
Well,
isn't
I mean,
as big as
we
you think.
wouldn't be doing as many shows for as many years as we have if there wasn't. I just
Right.
wanted to kind of give people, because it's taken me a little bit to understand really fully how they were able to do this. What you're explaining does fill in a lot of that information, but there's some little things in between there, like stuff that I've been trying to add here and there that kind of fit into the equation as well.
They
Sorry.
merged the court system. Article 3 equity is in with the Article 2 it's being run by. So unless you can prove you're a private Union state citizen, you can't access the Article 3 judiciary with all of the rights. If you say you're a U.S. citizen, you just waived your constitutional rights because you've contracted into their jurisdiction. And that's what the whole thing is. You voluntarily contracted into their jurisdiction. And I try to teach you how to involuntary that contract, how to get yourself back out of it. Okay. So,
awesome.
All right.
I think we left off at Proclamation 2039.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump to. All right. So the national emergency that was in 33, revoking the doctrine of necessity, the basis on which extraordinary actions by the administrative authority, which is Article 2, which is designed to restore safety and order. As long as there is chaos, there's an emergency martial law. And this is why the media every day shows you nothing but chaos on the news. They want to project that all of this is needed, that someone's got to do something. 1973, Senate Report 93-549. In the first sentence reads, quote, since March 1933, the United States has been in a declared national emergency. Later, this vast range of powers taken together confer enough authority to rule the country without reference to normal constitutional processes. The president may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, which he does all the day, every time now, without congressional approval, like the Constitution says, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation, all communication, restrict travel, TSA, airports, and control all the lives of the American citizens. And this has continued without interruption since 1933. A majority of the people of the United States have lived their entire lives under this emergency rule. Again, it's in the Constitution under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 about the habeas corpus. They're allowed to declare these national emergencies. Okay? The law of necessity, or otherwise known as the doctrine of belligerent occupation, overrides all other law. It covers all people, persons that are under the jurisdiction thereof. It suspends the Constitution if you're in that jurisdiction. So again, you've got people that are out there driving, say the 1907 U.S. Supreme Court says, I don't need a license. I have the right to travel. Well, two things are problematic with that. 1914, they overruled that. And in the belligerent occupation, their law supersedes the Constitution. So you don't have a right to travel. You can't be driving without a driver's license. You will have your car taken. You will get a ticket. And that's just the way it is. And so this is why these things are important.
You might have some success in that area here and there because you're dealing with a law enforcement officer who doesn't want to deal with the headache of you. And if you're not really dealing with anything but a minor traffic infraction, some police officers will be cool and not charge you. And you think you've had success, and then it happens to you again someplace else and you get arrested. And I've seen this happen with so many people that I don't even want to embarrass them and name them by name, but I've seen it so much. It's like, yeah, just because you've had one, maybe two successes, talk about how many failures you had. How many times did you go to jail versus how many times you did not get in trouble?
See, and that's the issue. That's the issue. That's when they, contact me. David Strait, even after a couple of years of saying that, got pulled over, got arrested, and got his truck seized. Okay. It's going to happen. Yes, you can infer that it worked, but I'm telling you, they just were nice and let you go. I'm telling you, under the military occupation, under this national emergency, they can and do this stuff. And if you don't understand and realize this, you're just at a disadvantage. I'm trying to help you. And I don't teach that kind of stuff. So there's a way to, again, get out of their jurisdiction, but you got to know how to do it. Okay? So I think we just kind of got into why we don't do that stuff anymore.
I mean, again, I want people to realize that they can get copies of the documents. The information will be scrolling across the bottom of the screen here. If you want the show notes for lesson number 7, just email ricemediagroup@protonmail.com and put KL docs in the subject line. That'd be appreciated. I said KL earlier. So either way, if you're interested in the USB, because all this stuff, if you listen through the 6 lessons previous to this and this, all this adds up to KL's 30 plus years of experience, putting it into a method that's real easy for people to be able to understand if you actually, or comprehend, if you actually take the time to make sure that you comprehend what you're doing. It's not a template system. It's not a cookie cutter system. You're going to have to put in a lot of work. And that's where the USB itself saves KL a lot of time. That's the most important thing, especially for people who do not have a lot of knowledge when it comes to this subject. Some people that might have learned from other people might be coming into this with a little bit more knowledge, but the USB package is a $500 donation. You're going to get the initial student instructions, recommendations, all the private lessons and documents, all the public lessons and documents, and that includes everything from the Odyssey playlist, and that includes what's also on the Rice Against the Grain YouTube playlist. You're going to get the instructions and videos about long and short form birth certificate authentication and the DBA doing business as. There's also information about how to apply for the passport, which me and KL will be doing a private video in the future in regards to the passport method and some things that he recommends. In addition to with the Freedom USB package, you're going to get added to that private Telegram group. And there's actually 2, one that's really organized by subjects and one that's kind of more of a free-for-all. That was the original group, but you'll be added to both. If you're a current or previous KL student and you're not in the group, you can email me at ricemediagroup@protonmail.com and put private Telegram group in the subject line if you want to get added. But there's 175 members already in that group. There's a lot of bonus information. This is everything you need to do before you reach out to KL for the paperwork process for part number 2, which is a $1,000 donation. The total cost $1,500, $500 donation for the USB information here. And then at your leisure, when you're ready, part 2, $1,000 donation to KL, and that will get you the paperwork process. And again, links will be down below for the playlist so that you can catch up on the other videos in case you haven't seen them. Before we wrap things up, you got any final thoughts, my friend? Anything you want to add?
No, other than, I know everyone's brought up, that this is the USA and everything's under the Constitution, and right now it's not. And this is where and how you can get into trouble. Just look at the J6ers, okay? Not one of them has gotten off. They've all gone to jail, right? Well, why? One, they were in the wrong jurisdiction because they're in D.C. They're not in one of the Union states. Then when they hire an attorney, they waived all their constitutional rights. So how can you expect to win any case when you've already waived all your rights and you surrender jurisdiction? This is what they depend upon, is your ignorance. So I just, again, my object is for you to become more knowledgeable. Please research anything that I've said and look it up for yourself. But I through years of experience and seeing people go through some very bad issues, I'm just trying to help them on the side of where you can be protected and actually have your constitutionally secured rights. And thus you have a little more control over your life. Even though you're still in an occupied territory, you're in a foreign jurisdiction, there's just certain things that we still have to abide by. And for most people, it's a very enjoyable journey and process. And I'll leave it at that.
Very eye-opening. And when you go down the rabbit hole and start to learn the truth is just very sweet. And you resonate with truth when you find it. And I think most people will agree with that statement. And if you've, one thing I'll add before we wrap things up is there's been a lot of things throughout my life that I've thought, like, how does this happen if it goes against the Constitution? And examples is, 1913 taxation of labor. That was only supposed to be for like 1%. And only for a short time period that got extended out to apparently being everybody. That was unconstitutional. The fact that we are no longer, our money, our currency, our dollar, our Federal Reserve notes are not backed by gold or silver, and the Constitution states that all money is supposed to be backed by gold and silver. And then the Constitution gave 19 enumerated powers, and we have all these agencies that now, like Donald Trump is going to, he's what's the word? Affirmed, electing, putting Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy in a department called Department of Government Efficiency, which the acronym stands for Doge, which is like Dogecoin, the cryptocurrency that Elon Musk likes so much. So, and they're talking about trying to chop out a lot of those unconstitutional enumerated powers that weren't granted to the federal government, that the federal government took upon itself as a monster to be able to create. So it's interesting to see kind of some of the things that you're talking about bleeding through in the mainstream without pushing the big narrative. Because it matches up when you really look at the bigger picture.
But it's obvious that a lot of what we're doing and they're doing is unconstitutional, quote, unconstitutional. And so something else has got to be going on. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm giving you the reason why and how this is going on. Yes, it is not according to the Constitution, because the Constitution is not in the jurisdiction that you are. So forget about it. Until you learn to operate in the current jurisdiction you're under, it doesn't help to keep trying to go back to that. Yes, it's unconstitutional to tax the real man, but they're not taxing the real man. They're taxing the straw man that they created with the birth certificate in the early 30s. Okay, the state, the Illinois state is different from the state of Illinois. The Illinois state has to do real money, but the state of Illinois is perfectly okay to use Federal Reserve notes. So again, it's the jurisdiction that makes the difference. And this is why the very first episode that I go over is about jurisdiction. This is the very first thing you got to learn. It'll all make much more sense, I think, once you listen to the podcast.
And this playlist that I'm showing here is the updated version of us going through these lessons. And this is lesson number 7 in this series that you see right here on Odyssey, which I didn't upload those old videos to Rice Against the Grain when I created the channel. There are 4 videos. There's 2 parts, but they're broken into 2 parts of original lessons that we had done back like in 2020. And then we started redoing the lessons back in 2022. So if you want to check out the older lessons and then getting into the newer lessons, I think by watching these older ones first and then kind of rehashing it in these first 3 here, it's going to help build that foundational knowledge. And that's the most important thing that you can do. And that's what the USB is designed to do, is help you to build that foundational knowledge.
Yes, because there's a lot to learn.
A lot, but it's a fun process and it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
And a lot to unlearn.
That's a good way of putting it. Lots of unlearning. All right. Well, if you could bear with me 1 second, my friend, it's going to do the wrap up. Again, links will be down below for the playlist. You could check those out. If you would like to get the show notes for lesson number 7, email rice@mediagroup@protonmail.com. Put, what did I say, KL docs in the subject line. If you're interested in USB, the information has been floating across. That will be down in the video description and pinned comment as well for the Freedom USB package and the donation requirements. And as always, I encourage you, make sure you subscribe to the channel, be a blessing to others, treat people how you want to be treated, be the glitch you want to see in this matrix, be the change you want to see in this world, question everything, know yourself. And until next time.